right now I'm going to introduce you Tiago. And he has been in the development business for 15 years, very experienced. He's currently very excited about the possibility of using Vue.js with NativeScripted, and it is this excitement that makes him very present into the NativeScript-Vue ecosystem and how developing production mobile apps feels like. On his next talk, oh, there you are. Hey, Tiago.
Hello, how are you?
How are you? I'm good, thank you. And you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very excited for this talk.
So am I. I did never got the chance to work with NativeScript-Vue yet. So
Yeah.
let's see what you're going to bring to me with cooking.
Okay.
And on your talk, you are going to let us know the main ha-has and gotchas that the framework offers us, and also give some real world experience for us to decide if using the framework is or not a good idea for actually like native development,
Mhm.
which is great because it's one of the questions that most pop up in companies when they think about introducing a mobile application for their business, right?
Mhm.
So I will now welcome you all for the talk, Cooking with NativeScript-Vue. The stage is yours, Tiago.
Okay, good day, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. Very sad that I am not in Verona. I visited it some years ago, and I really hoped that this would be a chance to go back, but here we are. But still, I hope this talk will be useful to you all, and I will try to share my experience with NativeScript-Vue. So, cooking with NativeScript-Vue. How do you build a NativeScript-Vue app? So, you grab a bowl, you throw some Vue.js in there, then you throw some NativeScript, you mix it all up, and voila, you have your NativeScript-Vue application. Thank you very much. This was my talk. Okay, I'm joking. I want to share more about the overall experience. But before talking about NativeScript-Vue, I would like to set some expectations correctly. I will assume that most people here listening to me are web developers, and I want you to picture this situation. You are in Paris and you go to this really fancy 3 Michelin stars restaurant, and you look at the menu. It's everything in French, so you don't really understand it. Everything is very expensive. Then you eventually choose something, and the garçon brings you this. Well, it's good, but it's not probably what you were expecting. So now this consider this other situation. You go for a run. You run for 10 kilometers. You have never ran that distance before. You are very happy, but also very tired. And you go home, and you are starving, of course, and your mom and your wife brings you this to eat, and probably you will be also very disappointed. So which meal is better, the one on the left or the one on the right? Well, as in most things with software development, it depends. So it's the same thing with NativeScript-Vue. Is it a good solution for you? Well, it depends. And it's really important to set the right expectations. So if you are building for mobile, you have to think mobile. And that means thinking like a mobile developer. So if you are coming from the web development world, maybe you never had to deal with some issues that are exclusive for on mobile applications. Some of them were discussed in the previous talk. But mostly you have to think small. So your screen is much smaller, and you have to think of a good way to use your screen real estate. That doesn't mean just like shrink everything, shrink your page uh, to fit in a mobile screen, because that would make probably everything not readable for the user. You have to redesign everything considering the mobile screen first. Also, you have to think that interactions are physical. So the user is not just clicking with the mouse on some link. People use their fingers. People use other sensors like the haptic feedback, the vibrations. You have to think that people uh, press things with their fingers that will cover other parts of the UI, and can be very awkward to do some interactions that would feel natural on a screen. And also, you have to craft each moment. So you have to be very uh, um, attentive to details, and each small experience must be carefully crafted, with proper feedback, which is kind of harder on mobile, and you know, with proper animations and all that. So again, if you are coming from the web development world, maybe you are like the mac and cheese developer, used to develop like big applications that solve some real world problem, but it's your like bread and butter, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are entering in the mobile development world, you have to start thinking as a haute cuisine chef and start paying attention to details. So with NativeScript-Vue, you can actually transition from the web development world to the native development world more easily, but it's not like a one-to-one match. So uh, get ready to change your mind on some things. So firstly, let's meet the chef. That's me. I am Tiago Alves. I am a web developer. I am working on irc.com, trying to bring IRC to the 21st century. I am building a NativeScript-Vue app so that you can interact with IRC servers, the old Internet Relay Chat protocol. And I am working with the Kiwi IRC team, and which is actually one of the sponsors of NativeScript-Vue. And I try to be active in the NativeScript-Vue community. So you may find me in their Slack channel or out there. So if you want to develop a native application, you have to think about two platforms. So if you want to build a true native experience, you would have to learn Java or Kotlin for Android. You would have to download and install and learn about Android Studio, and you would have to learn about the Android SDK. Similar for iOS, you would have to learn Swift or Objective-C, and download and use Xcode. So it would be a lot of technologies to learn just to make one simple mobile application. But there is an alternative, which is NativeScript. With NativeScript, you can build applications that will work on Android and iOS. And in their website, it says that NativeScript is an open source framework for building truly native mobile apps with Angular, Vue.js, TypeScript, or JavaScript. And the really interesting part here is the truly native part. So with NativeScript, you are building applications not for a web view like Ionic or Cordova, but you are building truly native mobile applications. This means that your application will be using native components to build their interfaces, and you will actually be able to do everything that you can do on a truly native mobile application using the native languages and platforms, which is pretty cool. So what are the main differences between using NativeScript or an hybrid or PWA? And with this, I mean like a web application that runs in the browser and maybe you can install on your home screen, like some platforms allows you to do. So with NativeScript, you use some sort of XML, which is kind of not exactly HTML, and you use some sort of CSS that has some differences with the CSS that you know, but it's very similar. But you actually use the JavaScript or the TypeScript just like you would use on a web application. But with NativeScript, you will use native components. So you will use components that map directly to the native components for each platform. While on an hybrid or PWA, you will use like buttons or spans or divs that are web components. They only work on the browser. And also, on NativeScript, you will be using the native platform, not the web platform. So also maybe answering a question for the previous talk. For instance, all those events that the package uses in the previous talk would have to be different on NativeScript because the events will be different. So all that API that you find under window on the web platform, it will not work on NativeScript. But there are other ways to achieve the same things. But yeah, they are different. So with NativeScript, you don't actually have a DOM, so you have to find other ways to grab references to your elements. But it's actually easier with Vue because you can use refs and other things. You are using NativeScript components, and let's take a look at some of those NativeScript components. For instance, you have button and label and switches, and as you can see, they are a bit different from iOS or Android. So when you create a switch on iOS, it will use like the native the native component, which is different from the native component on Android. So they will look a bit different, and other components will be a bit different. For instance, the activity indicator will be quite different, and other components. But this is because NativeScript tries to respect the native platform. So when you create an application for iOS or Android, the user will be expecting some UI design guidelines, and with NativeScript, it's easier to respect and follow those guidelines, and the UI that the user is accustomed to, because NativeScript will make everything look very native for you. So this means that you will have, of course, to test on iOS and Android to see if everything fits as you want. But yeah, it's easier to do that. Also, with NativeScript, you use layouts to build or to compose your user interface instead of the divs. So in NativeScript, there are 6 types of layouts. The first one is the flexbox, which kind of mimics the API, the Flexbox API on the web. So if you are a Flexbox user, you can use this more easily. There's also the dock layout. This is the second screen here that allows you to push components to the sides of your screen. Very useful also. There is the stack layout. This layout only stacks components, but it's a very fast layout, very with very good performance. And then there are the grid layout. Those other two. This one. The fourth one is the wrap layout, so you can add components, and when they don't fit, they will wrap to the next line, kind of like blocks, on CSS and the web. Then there's the grid layout that allows you to make a grid of your screen, and it's also very powerful. And the absolute layout, where you can place these components however you want. Actually, I find this much easier to put components on the screen instead of using divs or any other thing that I have used on web development. It's much easier to just put the component wherever we want. And yeah, I really like working with layouts instead of the regular CSS, Flexbox, even grid on the web. And also, in NativeScript, you have navigation instead of routing. So on the web, you have like the address bar, and the user can type anything in there. And so when you are building web applications, you have to take all sorts of things into consideration. But on NativeScript, you use another type of navigation that allows you to change screens on your app. But it's actually quite different from, for instance, using some routing library on the web. So these are the main differences that you'll have to learn before starting building your NativeScript application. But NativeScript also offers a very awesome feature that's kind of unmatched in other similar frameworks like React Native, and that's that NativeScript proxies all native APIs. This means that you can use NativeScript and access the underlying native APIs directly without doing anything special. So, for instance, if I need some special functionality on some native component, I can go directly to the documentation for each platform and see what's there and just use it directly. Of course, we don't do that. We just go to Stack Overflow and search whatever we want to search. But here goes a small example. This is the JavaScript that runs on NativeScript. And in here, I have 2 ifs just to protect the code from running in the wrong platform. So if it's Android, I am running this line over here. So this is a function that will square a value. This is not very useful, but just see what's going on here. In here, I am calling directly the math API on Android. This is like the Java object that you can find when you are coding in Java, and I am calling this directly from the JavaScript. And the same for iOS. I can use the power function, and this is actually a C function, and I am using it on my JavaScript without doing anything special. So this means that NativeScript is actually doing lots of things quite magical here. For instance, it is translating the JavaScript types like numbers into the types that are expected on the native functions. So it translates numbers to integers, floats, doubles, and whatever automatically. So this may not feel very special, but when you go into some more complex structures on Android or iOS, like enums or other types of objects, or structs on iOS, for instance, NativeScript does all that for you, which is pretty cool. For example, I had this problem. I wanted to add some text shadow, but the NativeScript API for the label would not have this functionality. So I went to Stack Overflow and learned how to implement text shadow on Android and iOS. And for Android, it's just this function, set shadow layer. And so I grabbed a reference to the underlying Android label component, and I just called the function directly with some parameters to position the shadow and to define the blur and the color. And I did the same thing for iOS. And as you can see here, I am using some native objects and constants like CG color, this CG size make. If you have ever developed a native iOS application, you know this function. So, and I am doing all that in JavaScript, which is pretty cool. So I made this demo where I use this API to implement some shadows. Cool. But so far I'm only talking about NativeScript. How about Vue? So I think that using NativeScript with Vue is even more magical. Components written in NativeScript-Vue. This is some code. Does it look familiar? Well, I think so. This is a single file component, and like on any other web Vue.js component, you have your template, you have your script part, and you have your style where you can put your CSS. So the only difference here is that on the template, you have some special components. The scripts part is pretty much the same. And on your style, you actually have to style your NativeScript components. So the selectors will be a bit different, and there's also some properties that are specific for NativeScript, for instance, or horizontal alignment and vertical alignment. That's something that you will not find on the web, but they work on NativeScript. But overall, it's very similar, right? There's also something that's very cool. That's the NativeScript property system. So consider this component. You have a label and you have a class, and that class applies the background color blue to that label. Okay, nothing special here. But with NativeScript, every CSS property is actually converted into an attribute. So you can set those attributes for pretty much anything directly in the component. And since we are using NativeScript with Vue, we can transform those attributes into observed or reactive properties. So you can attach the background color to some property that can be a data property or a computer property. And with that, you can do all sorts of crazy things. I have some examples. The shadow example that I showed you before uses this, just attaches the shadow property to some computed property, and also all these animations work directly, just by twinning the property. And these are GIFs, so maybe they are a bit jumping, but the performance is actually quite good. It's very smooth, much smoother than they will look here. So they work great. Vue.js is very fast, and NativeScript is also very fast. So mixing Vue.js, maybe you are used to lots of libraries with Vue.js. Can you use them with NativeScript-Vue? Well, let's see. First, Vuex. Can you use it with NativeScript-Vue? Yes, you can, because Vue.js is just JavaScript. It doesn't touches the UI or anything that's that's exclusive for NativeScript or for the web platform. So it works. Vue router. Nope, it does not work. There were actually some attempts to make Vue router work with NativeScript-Vue, but the thing is that navigation on the native platform is fundamentally different from the web. So yeah, it's not worth the trouble. This famous internationalization library, does it work? Yep, it's working, and I actually use it in my project. So I am sharing the translations from the web application with the mobile application. It works no problem. Transition. So this is a tricky component, because I don't know if you have ever used it. This is like a special component that applies some animation to components when they show up or when they leave the screen. And oddly enough, they actually work. So there are some gotchas there. I have an article explaining how exactly to avoid some issues, but well, it works with CSS or with the JavaScript events, but you can use them with NativeScript-Vue. Cool. And other libraries like Axios for calling server and REST APIs, tweezing for animation, it also works. But developing, or cooking, is not just about the right ingredients. You also have to have the right kitchen. So a good kitchen, with the right appliances, is very important for the cooker experience. So how is the development experience with NativeScript-Vue? What are our tools at our disposal? So firstly, you have live sync and hot module replacement working with NativeScript-Vue. That means that you can connect a device to your laptop, and the application will be updated as you save your application on your code, and it works well. So cool. You can also use the Chrome DevTools, for instance, for debugging your JavaScript. So you can put some breakpoints somewhere on your code, and then debug, inspect variables, and do all that. It works. You also have the playground. The playground is like a code sandbox for NativeScript-Vue. This means that you can just open this web page and start playing with NativeScript-Vue, and then you can actually preview your application on your real device. So when you press that preview button, it will show a QR code that you can scan and test on your device in a matter of seconds. Pretty cool. There's also the Teamview Studio. I have never used this, but this is like a no-code tool where you can build some applications of part of applications or prototypes with drag and drop components. But this is a paid application, so yeah. But if you are interested in this type of tools, well, it's also an option. And Vue devtools. So you can also use them with NativeScript-Vue, for instance, to debug your component's state or to debug Vuex. You can use it. So overall, it's very similar to the normal developer experience. And yeah, it's cool. But there's more. You also have the plugin market. And with NativeScript, there are maybe thousands of plugins that are ready to use. You can just include them in your project with npm. And when I mentioned before that you can access the native APIs, well, that's something that you can do, but chances are that you never have to do that because there are lots of plugins, and whenever you need something more specific or access some native capability, probably like 99% of probability, someone already built a plugin that does that for you. So just check this marketplace and browse through all the NativeScript plugins. There are also lots of learning resources. So if you like video courses, you have nativescripting.com. This platform teaches you all about NativeScript, but they also have a few courses on NativeScript-Vue. There is also this other workshop. This is like an online workshop where you code and they explain things as you build your application. And there's also Stack Overflow. So whenever you have some question, you can go there. And this is actually very good. Sometimes I go to Stack Overflow to answer some question, to earn some of those internet points. And someone already answered that question. So the community is very good. And the community Slack, I always hang out there myself, so it's a very good place to find answers for your questions. You will find like the NativeScript-Vue creator Igor and other NativeScript core team members that will answer questions, which is cool. So can I use NativeScript-Vue? Is NativeScript-Vue a good solution for you? Well, first of all, if you use NativeScript-Vue, you get to use your Vue.js skills. So if you already know Vue.js, you can translate most of that knowledge to NativeScript-Vue. You can share code with a web app. So if you already have a web application, maybe you can grab some of that code or lots of that code into your web application, and of course, you will only reuse code that does not touch the UI. So if you have like a service layer or some libraries that connect to your backend or something like that, you can reuse that. Actually, that's what I am using in my day job, sharing a ton of code with the web version. You have limitless native capabilities. Within NativeScript, you are never afraid of being stuck or limited by the platform. Like, for instance, in React Native, if something is missing or if you need something, you will have to wait for someone to develop a plugin for that, or maybe wait for the core team to implement whatever you need. But building some native capability for React Native or for Cordova means that you actually have to learn Objective-C for iOS or Java for Android and build really native code. But with NativeScript, as I showed you, it's much easier to do this. And if you are interested in enterprise support, NativeScript-Vue is powered by NStudio, so you can actually hire, the NativeScript developers to work on your project or do some consulting. So if this is something that will reassure you or your boss, well, it can be important. So thank you very much. This was my talk. Those are my handles. I hope you learned something, and let me hear if you have some questions.
Hello, thank you very much for all the cooking. I even got hungry seeing ingredients and everything. Well, we do have questions here. What about the Vue native versus NativeScript-Vue?
Okay, so Vue Native, I have never played with it, but Vue Native does something that feels a little weird for me because Vue Native converts Vue to React Native and then from React Native, to the native platforms, and that's like an extra step that I think can bring lots of problems. And well, I also think that NativeScript has some advantages over React Native. So those are my two main concerns about Vue Native. Also, I haven't heard a lot about Vue Native lately. Maybe it's just me, but I think it didn't. It's not as popular as NativeScript-Vue. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't heard so much as well. They have some buzzes here and there, but NativeScript-Vue, I have heard more. We have another question though. It does look like a good use case for composition API. So is Vue 3 supported, or is it gonna be as soon as it's released?
Yep, it's in beta right now. So if you are feeling brave, you can actually use Vue 3 with NativeScript. Yeah, and yeah, but remember that is still not a production ready because the developers also had a big NativeScript release just a couple of weeks ago. So, but now Igor, who is the creator of NativeScript-Vue, will focus more on that. But it's in beta, and it will be definitely be released soon. That's what I can tell you. And I
Oh,
agree
that
that
is
there are lots of opportunities for doing cool stuff with the composition API.
yeah. We want to get benefits for everything.
Yep.
I think it's going to be my last question right now. Would you always choose NativeScript Vue over native development, and why?
Well, I think that the main constraint for this is your team or your company or your project, because if you are a big company that's focused on your mobile applications like an Uber or a big company, maybe you will actually want to have an Android team and an iOS team, and if you can afford that, okay, go with that. But if you are a small team with a smaller project and you don't have the resources to fork and to have two separate teams and to deal with all the issues, synchronizing APIs and things like that and functionalities, well, go with NativeScript. It works very well, and yeah. for a smaller team, I would definitely recommend it over building native applications.
Nice. A new question just popped up. Let me just get it. In terms of application installation size, how good is NativeScript-Vue? I think compared to the native development.
Well, NativeScript has a bit of an overhead. So when you build like a very simple application, NativeScript-Vue will have to bundle the JavaScript interpreter and engine, V8, and we'll have to also bundle some other things. So it will add like 15 megabytes. So well, it's something, but it's not very bad, and it's a smaller problem each day. So yeah, if it's a problem for you, maybe
Yeah,
you have to think about.
I mean, when we were just talking about the device limitations, and for some places in the world, some devices don't have as much memory to install apps, so it might be decisive to make a decision.
Yeah,
for the company. I don't know.
well, it depends on your app, and there are lots of things that you can do to optimize it. But yeah, it will add some overhead. But well, it's not that much. So think about 15, 20 megabytes.
Yeah. Okay, that's nice to have a number. Another question, whether there were technical tasks in your experience that could not be done with NativeScript-Vue?
Yeah, I had to do something that I could not do directly with NativeScript-Vue, but I was able to dive into the native code and implement things that I would do. For instance, a very hard problem for iOS is keyboard management. It's a really mess dealing with a keyboard. It's really hard, but I managed to do everything that I needed to do using the native APIs. So actually, I in a way, I could do everything that I wanted to do with NativeScript, and yeah, it was never a limitation.